After faking his death for 3 years, the husband had finally returned. He stood upon the vacant plot of land that should have been the Marquis Manor, eyes bulging, mouth agape in shock, fury blazing as he beat his chest in rage. Cheers and applause echoed through the streets. He had fled too far. He probably still had no idea what had transpired. On the day of our grand wedding, he had led his cousin, who faked her death, to elope with him, while I too had taken my dowry and faked my own death to escape. The Marquis Manor was left without an heir, drowning in debt, its titles stripped and residence confiscated. According to the latest planning for the imperial capital, this place had been transformed into a street dedicated to street performances and acrobatics. When it came to fleeing, the two of us were truly evenly matched. He had not even cared about the life or death of the Marquis Manor, yet he still expected me to shoulder its debts in his stead? Dream on. In the bridal hall, mother-in-law and the young aunt clung to each other, weeping bitterly. A young servant had just stumbled in to report that my husband, Lu Yan, while galloping back to the capital for the wedding, had been ambushed and fallen into a deep ravine. They had searched for half a day and retrieved only a horse saddle and a broken rein. It seemed unlikely he had survived. I sat behind the red bridal veil, unable to suppress the cold smile at the corner of my lips. In my past life, I had knelt in this very bridal hall just like this, listening to them cry and truly weeping along with them. But it was not for that husband I had never met. It was for my own fate, stepping through the door only to be condemned to a life of widowhood. I had thought that although the Marquis Manor had fallen on hard times, the people within still harbored warmth. As long as I treated mother-in-law and the young aunt well, the three of us women could hold this household together. During those 5 years, I poured all my heart and soul into it, filially caring for mother-in-law, looking after the young aunt, and clearing the mountain of shameful debts the old Marquis had accumulated in the brothels during his lifetime. I managed the Marquis Manor in an orderly fashion, and even saved up 100 taels of silver as dowry for the young aunt, marrying her off in grand style. Just as I was about to enjoy a few days of peace, Lu Yan returned, returning from the dead with his lover and their 2 illegitimate children. Only then did I learn that this entire family was rotten to the core. To escape their debts, they had plotted for Lu Yan and his cousin Lu Fang to fake their deaths and flee. They used me as a fat sheep to slaughter, forced me to clean up the mess, then drove me out onto the streets. I truly could not swallow that indignation. Gritting my teeth, I went to beat the drum and file a complaint. To file a lawsuit against my in-laws, one must first endure 20 strokes of the cane. I gritted my teeth and bore it all. Fortunately, the Jingzhao Yin, Wenzheng, had once been a student sponsored by my father in his youth. With his maneuvering, I managed to recover half of my dowry, obtained a letter of divorce, and returned to my natal home. But that beast Lu Yan colluded with bandits to kill me on the road back. In the panic of fleeing, I fell into a deep ravine and plunged into the pool below. What a coincidence! It was the very same ravine where Lu Yan had supposedly died. I had even erected a cenotaph by the pool beneath this ravine and visited every year to pay respects, so I knew the paths here well. Heaven never seals off all paths for man. My swimming skills were not bad. After struggling through several near drownings, I finally survived. By the time I returned to the capital, 3 days had passed. The Lu family, thinking I was dead, was holding a grand feast to celebrate in the manor. I had managed the Lu household for many years and still had a few loyal confidants. Taking advantage of their joyful celebration, I had the chef poison the banquet, wiping out the entire family, then led my loyalists and fled to the western regions, never to return to the central plains again. The Lu family had wronged me, and they had paid with their lives. The dead settle their debts. I held no more grudges. With my temperament of clearly distinguishing gratitude and grudges, I never mistreated myself in the latter half of my life. In the western regions, I accumulated a vast fortune, kept several handsome foreign young men, and lived happily until the age of 80, ready to pass on peacefully. I had thought only those bearing deep blood feuds would be granted a second chance to rewrite their fate. I never expected that someone like me, who settled scores on the spot, could also get a do-over. Just thinking about having to deal with the Lu family's mess all over again immediately stirred in me the desire to flee. I was old now. I did not want to waste even a bit of extra energy or endure any more unnecessary suffering. Besides enjoying the drama from the sidelines and watching the show, I wanted to do nothing else. I had long passed the age of 50, the age of knowing the decrees of heaven, understanding that meeting force with force was the inferior strategy. Of the 36 stratagems, fleeing was the best. If Lu Yan could run, why could I? If he ran, I would run too, Flee early and enjoy retirement early. After carefully planning the escape in detail, I turned and gave Taiyun a few instructions. After she left, I fiercely pinched myself, took a deep breath, and forcefully lifted the red bridal veil, revealing a face covered in tears. "Taya, prepare the horses," I cried out in sorrowful despair. "My husband cannot be dead. I will definitely find him." Amid the whispers filling the hall, mother-in-law hurried forward in panic and grabbed me. "Child, leave the matter of searching for him to the servants. You stay home and wait. Do not even think of going out." I painfully shook off her hand. If my husband is dead, I will not live alone either." As I spoke, I led several maidservants and strode out of the manor. The carriage outside had long been prepared. The driver cracked his whip. Dust billowed, and the carriage sped away with me inside, kicking up a cloud of sand that struck Madame Lu full in the face as she chased after us. Once we were out of sight, I wiped away my tears, my expression turning calm. I quickly removed the heavy formal wedding attire, changed into light, comfortable clothes, and draped the outer robe over myself. Taiyue beside me swiftly removed the heavy hairpins and ornaments from my head, casually replacing the phoenix crown on top. The carriage flew like the wind and soon arrived at the place where Lu Yan had fallen into the ravine. A crowd had already gathered at the edge. The servants from the Marquis Manor were pretending to hold poles to fish for the body. I alighted and staggered to the edge of the ravine, crying as if my heart were being torn apart. Husband, how could you be so ill?" said. Fated? Having watched plays for 40 years, the singing, reciting, and acting came naturally to me. After a brief moment of thought, my voice had become desolate and despairing. In the end, quite a few onlookers were moved to tears as well. I had performed enough. I choked out 2 sobs and let out a tragic, piercing cry. "Husband, your wife has come to accompany you." The moment the words left my lips, under the gaze of the Lu family servants, I leaped into the deep ravine. Gasps of shock rang out everywhere. The wind howled past my ears as I accurately plunged into the pool below. The bone-chilling water instantly engulfed my entire body. I gritted my teeth and held my breath, quickly shedding my outer clothes, flinging the phoenix crown into the water, then taking a deep breath and diving to the bottom before swimming swiftly toward the shore. On the shore, where grass and water intertwined densely, I hunched over and circled around before dashing straight into the forest. Deep within the woods, Taiyun had already driven a carriage to wait. I climbed aboard, changed out of my soaked clothes into men's attire that I usually wore when going out, and the carriage sped along a secret path out of the city. At the same time, on the cliff face, Taiyue led people in beginning the search for my body. Of course, all they found were my formal wedding clothes and the phoenix crown. The young madam had committed suicide for love. The news spread back to the Marquis Manor. It was said that mother-in-law Madame Chu, besides being shocked, was so overcome with grief that she fainted on the spot. I did not need to guess to know that in her heart, she was probably blooming with joy. The Marquis Manor had married me for the sake of my dowry. Now that the thorn in their side was dead, weren't those 80 chests of dowry all hers? It was a pity that those 8 chests were made of top-grade sandalwood. What a waste. The carriage traveled all the way to an estate on the outskirts of the imperial capital. This was one of the dowries my parents had given me. Wrapped in cotton quilts the entire way, I was still a bit cold, but it was much better than in my past life. Back then, I had already suffered caning and struggled for a long time in the cold pool. My body had been damaged, and I would never have children again. The carriage stopped in front of a 2-room house within the estate. Chin Mama, who had come as part of my dowry, came out to greet me. She had been my mother's personal maidservant and had cared for me since childhood. Before marrying into the Marquis Manor, I had thought it a noble and prestigious household that might not be able to contain me, so I had prepared an escape route early on, sending Chin Mama to the estate to arrange everything in case of unforeseen circumstances. I never expected I would actually need it. Seeing my face pale as death, Chin Mama panicked and quickly ordered someone to heat the bed warmer in the main room, while instructing the kitchen to cook a thick pot of ginger soup. I curled up under the blankets, warmth gradually spreading through my body, as if enveloped by a warm hand. I dozed off in a daze, not yet deeply asleep, when the scent of ginger wafted into my nose. Chin Mama gently patted me. "Do not sleep yet, young miss. Drink the ginger soup while it is hot, sweat it out, then sleep. Catching a chill is no small matter." She held the bowl, blew on it gently, and fed it to me. The spicy warmth traveled down my throat to my stomach, heating up my internal organs. I drank it all in one go, and my entire body broke out in a thick layer of sweat, the chill in every bone seeping out with the perspiration. In my drowsy state, I felt Chin Mama wipe the sweat from me before I fell back into slumber. When I next awoke, it was already afternoon the following day. Sunlight filtered through the window, casting fragmented golden patches across the room, making it feel incredibly warm. I stretched, and a fragrant aroma entered my nose, making my stomach rumble immediately. Young Miss is awake. Come eat something. Chin Mama entered carrying a food box. Kayun curled up her legs and placed a small table on the heated brick bed, setting out a bowl of soft, smooth steamed eggs with perilla and a bowl of golden chicken noodles. Young Miss, eat while it is hot. Perilla has the effect of dispelling cold. Eating it will force the cold chi out. The chicken soup is nourishing and helps recover vitality. I picked up a spoon and scooped a piece of the steamed egg. It melted in my mouth. The distinctive spicy fragrance of the perilla was like a gentle breeze dispersing the cold chi, and I took another bite of the noodles. The rich flavor of the chicken broth enveloped the noodles, making my whole body feel much more comfortable. Satisfied, I slurped down the last mouthful of noodles. Taiyun then began recounting the news that Caiyue had sent over early that morning. After I jumped into the ravine yesterday, Madame Lu had arrived by carriage, pretended to cry for a while, then used feeling unwell as an excuse to leave. As soon as it grew completely dark, the Lu family servants also withdrew one after another. Only Caiyue continued leading the dowry maidservants in putting on a full performance of searching back and forth along the cliff face, not returning to the Marquis Manor until the moon had risen high in the sky. When they dragged their leaden legs back to the Marquis Manor, they discovered the side door had been tightly shut. They knocked for a long time, but there was not a single response from inside. Even Cai Huan, who had stayed behind to watch the house, had been driven out, squatting in a corner by the door hugging a small bundle of luggage, her face streaked with tears. Young Miss had just left when they drove me out. Caiyue gritted her teeth and continued knocking. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, an impatient shout finally came from inside. The madam has ordered that unrelated persons are not allowed inside. The night wind blew cold enough to make one shiver. The onlookers grew increasingly numerous, whispering among themselves at the head of the alley. The Marquis Manor was truly shameless. The daughter-in-law had just committed suicide out of love, and they had driven out all the dowry servants. Were they planning to swallow the dowry as well? The Lin family from Shuzhong were great wealthy merchants. Those 80 chests of dowry, even the chests themselves made of sandalwood, were worth a fortune. Amid the discussions, Caiyue achieved her goal and withdrew, leading everyone back to the residence behind the street, the one from which I had just been married out that day. The next morning, before dawn had fully broken, the main gate was pounded thunderously. Outside the door, Madame Lu's brows and eyes were filled with unconcealable anxiety. She had brought 7 or 8 strong serving women along with a burly male servant, looking fierce and aggressive. The moment Caiyue pulled the door bolt, Madame Lu led her people surging inside, blocking the doorway and demanding bluntly, "Where is the dowry of your young miss?" Caiyue performed a salute, neither hurried nor slow. Reporting to Madame, was the dowry not already carried into the manor in a grand procession? Hearing this, Madame Lu grew even angrier, her voice rising sharply. "You cheap wench, I am asking where the contents of the dowry are. Why are all the chests empty? Where did you hide the things?" Taiyun, seeing her rudeness, refused to back down. "Madame's words are truly unreasonable. We beat gongs and drums carrying in the 80 chests of dowry. Everyone saw it. Yesterday, the moment something happened to our young miss, we, the dowry servants, were driven out by you, and the dowry was left in the manor under your personal management for half a day. Now it is suddenly empty. I still want to ask you about that." Madame Lu's mouth twitched. Last night, after Caiyue and the others had been shut outside, she had immediately called for a locksmith to pry open all the large locks on the 80 dowry chests in the storeroom. She had thought they would be filled with gold, silver, silks and jewels, but upon opening chest after chest, all were completely empty. At that moment, Madame Lu had gone weak in the knees and collapsed to the ground, unable to get up for a long time. Although the Lin family was far away in Shuzhong, they were renowned wealthy merchants with businesses spanning the world. They absolutely would not allow their only daughter to marry out with empty dowry chests. She had not slept a wink all night, her mind in turmoil. The more she thought, the more choked with rage she became, and before dawn, she had led her people charging over here in a fury. Seeing that Caiyue refused to tell the truth, Madame Lu composed herself and forced a concerned expression. "I was only anxious and confused. The Lin patriarch and Madame Lin have only one daughter. Now that you are gone, I already have difficulties explaining myself. If something else goes wrong with the dowry, I am afraid the Lin patriarch, Madame Lin, and even you dowry servants will have a hard time explaining it. Cai Yue timely showed a hint of panic. Madame Lu immediately pressed on, your Lin family does business across the world. Could it be that young Miss Lin only had the few things in these chests? Are there no other dowry items? For example, banknotes, land deeds, and the like. Cai Yue lowered her head in thought for a moment before replying, if the old madam asks about this, there truly are some. The patriarch did prepare a stack of banknotes, saying they were for the young miss to keep as private savings, to be handed over to her after she entered the husband's household. Madame Lu's eyes immediately lit up. Where are the banknotes? Cai Yue sighed and took out a handkerchief to wipe the corner of her eye. The young miss carried them on her person, saying she wanted to hand them over to her husband personally on the wedding day. Now that something has happened to the young miss, those banknotes are probably still on her. Before she finished speaking, Cai Yue had already begun sobbing loudly. Madame Lu's expression changed like a revolving lantern, turning white then red, finally settling on a livid green. Prepare the carriage to the ravine. Madame Lu's vision darkened, and she forced herself to steady her body, turning to leave, nearly tripping over the threshold. The serving women and male servant hurriedly followed. The group that had charged in aggressively now staggered out dejectedly. Behind them, Cai Yue covered her face and wept even louder. Beneath the handkerchief, the corner of her mouth could hardly suppress a smile. For the next 3 days, the servants of the Yangning Marquise Manor truly met with bloody bad luck. After the cold dew solar term, the mountain winds whipped across faces like knives, and the water in the ravine pool grew even colder, piercing to the bone. A thin layer of ice crackled along the shore. At Madame Lu's command, the male servants immediately set up rafts and searched the pool inch by inch. In the deeper sections, they tied ropes around themselves and took turns diving down to search. When they surfaced, every one of them was shivering from the cold. Several had already begun running fevers, but Madame Lu would not allow them to stop. We must find the living if alive, the body if dead. Clothes, shoes, even the sachet. Search thoroughly and fish everything up. She herself had no time to rest either. Wrapped in a thick cloak and holding a hand warmer, she personally stood on the cliff supervising. By the second day, she began coughing. By the third day, her face was flushed with fever. Her personal mama advised, Madam, the wind is too strong. You should return to the manor to rest first. Leave this place to this servant to watch over. Madame Lu waved her hand, her voice already hoarse. Number, I must keep watch here personally. I absolutely cannot let outsiders profit from this. Blown by the cold wind for 3 full days on the cliff, on the morning of the 4th day, Madame Lu was feverish and red as a boiled shrimp, collapsing on the mountaintop. Madam, you cannot continue facing the wind like this. The mama was frantic, stamping her feet. Your health is what matters. Madame Lu wanted to say something, but was interrupted by a violent cough. She raised her head to look at the unfathomably deep pool, then at the male servants trembling from cold yet having found nothing, and finally lost all hope. Grinding her teeth, she spat out one word, go. When the 80 chests of dowry had been carried into the manor, they had already been empty inside. If the dowry had not been empty, I would not have dared to flee so freely. In recent years, refugees had gathered, bandits ran rampant, and Shuzhong was 1,000 li from the capital. Moreover, there was a difference in status between the Marquis Manor and my family. My parents, fearing something unexpected might happen, had converted most of my dowry into banknotes from several banks in the capital, along with house and land deeds, for me to carry on my person. The 80 dowry chests were only to deceive outsiders. Inside, they were completely empty. Additionally, there was a cart of treasures secretly escorted by the Wei Yuan escort agency, waiting only for me to establish a firm footing in the Marquis Manor before being delivered inside. In the afternoon, with the sunlight still gentle and warm, I released a carrier pigeon from the estate. A short note was tied to its leg, bearing only 2 characters, Wei Yang. This was the signal my parents and I had agreed upon beforehand. That cart of treasures would never be delivered to the capital again. In my past life, half of those treasures had been poured into the Marquis Manor. 1/3 had been used to fill the deficit in military provisions that the old Marquis had left behind. From his youth, he had kept more than a dozen beauties in the brothels, squandering the Marquis Manor's fortune until it was drowning in debt. 1/3 had been used to maintain the Manor's social connections and to supplement Lu Wanyi's dowry. The remainder had been sent into the imperial palace to cultivate relationships and preserve the Marquis title for the Lu family. As dusk gradually fell and autumn winds rose, leaves scattered across the courtyard. The Yongning Marquis Manor, with its unfilial descendants, should have turned to dust long ago. Were the Liu family truly foolish to the bone, or had they read too many storybooks and harbored wild fantasies, that they actually nodded in agreement to Liu Yan's absurd plan of faking death? Madame Liu's natal family had committed a crime, and the entire clan had been escorted back to their ancestral home, forbidden from holding office for 5 generations. She had wanted to bring her niece into the household to pull her natal family up, an intention I could understand. But 1,000 mistakes, 10,000 mistakes. She should not have openly raised the daughter of a convicted official right under everyone's noses. And certainly should not have deluded herself into thinking that girl could seize the position of main wife that I had painstakingly managed for years. Although the Marquis title was hereditary, there was no true lasting wealth and nobility in this world. Back when the ancestors had established their great achievements, they had been enfeoffed as 4 dukes and 9 marquises, so prestigious and powerful. Looking back now, only 3 households remain. Not to mention the distant past. Even during the previous emperor's reign, that champion marquis had passed away young, leaving no heir to inherit. The title could be seized as easily as it was granted. The residence and estates were all reclaimed, and the entire family instantly became commoners in the blink of an eye. 1 emperor, 1 set of ministers. Noble families like the Liu family, lacking imperial favor and without any real meritorious achievements, had occupied their positions without performing their duties for years, yet they still dreamed of eternal wealth and nobility. Even without me lifting a finger, those new nobles in the capital who were eager to try their hand had long been watching with wide eyes for the day the Liu family collapsed, so they could step over them and rise to the heavens in a single bound. I calmed myself and carefully recalled every single deficit in military provisions that I had filled on behalf of the old marquis back then, recording them all. Then I had someone use their left hand to change the handwriting and make several dozen copies. In the dead of night, I quietly sent people to throw a few copies in front of the residences of His Majesty's maternal relatives, the Empress' maternal relatives, and before the gates of several famously upright and impartial high officials in the Court of Judicial Review. Of course, I did not overlook anyone. As the saying goes, a centipede dies but never falls down completely. But at this point it was time for the wall to collapse and everyone to push. How the court was shaken, I, merely a merchant, did not know clearly. But the scene on the day the title was seized, Cai Yue stood at the front of the crowd of onlookers, eating melon seeds while watching from beginning to end, then ran back under cover of darkness to recount it to me in detail. The main branch of the Liu family no longer had any male heirs. His Majesty, probably still mindful of the remaining female relatives, had preserved a bit of dignity. He only seized the title and reclaimed the residence, giving them half a day to pack their belongings before leaving. But now the Liu family was nothing but an empty shell of a marquis manor. Besides clothes and jewelry, what else was worth taking? The last bit of silver had already been spent on the wedding arrangements, all in anticipation of me entering the household to spend my dowry. Watching helplessly as others sealed the marquis manor, Madame Liu finally seemed to awaken from her dream. Standing outside the gate, she beat her thighs and wailed, "My son is not dead. The Liu family still has its bloodline. I will summon him back immediately." The surrounding commoners whispered among themselves. No one had ever heard of faking death before. They all thought the old lady had gone mad. Luani also wept and knelt before the confiscating officials, begging, "Elder brother is truly still alive. He was only bewitched by that cheap wench of a concubine, faking his death to leave, planning to return and inherit the title after she gave birth to a son. Who knew that cheap wench might already be pregnant? Our marquis manor truly still has its bloodline. I beg you, my lord, do not strip the title." Mother and daughter wept and pleaded. The official proclaiming the edict had long since lost patience and said coldly, "Did you not hear the imperial edict clearly? Seizing the title is not only because there is no heir, but also because of the old Marquis Liu Xuan's crime of embezzlement." He paused, his voice growing even deeper. Madame Liu, today in court, the memorials accusing Marquis Liu of embezzlement piled up like a mountain. His Majesty flew into a thunderous rage. Merely seizing the title was already leaving you some face. If the old madam continues to make a scene, do not blame me for turning ruthless. As soon as he finished speaking, his blade was drawn from its sheath. Madame Liu and Lu Wani were so terrified they immediately stopped crying. The man continued, "I advise you to pack up quickly. I am busy today and will only give you the time it takes for 1 incense stick to burn." Only then did Madame Lu and Lu Wanyi truly panic, weeping as they frantically gathered their belongings. Caiyue watched the Marquis Manor in utter chaos, finished half a bag of melon seeds from Rui Studio, and contentedly returned to Lin residence behind the street. Just as she sat down and picked up her rice bowl, knocking suddenly sounded at the door outside. The gatekeeper came to report that people from the Lu family had arrived. Madame Lu was still putting on airs, saying that after all, the two families were in-laws, and although the young miss had passed, filial piety remained. She wanted to come stay here for a while. Caiyue set down her chopsticks and unhurriedly instructed the gatekeeper to bring out the large wolfhound to scare them a bit. The young miss is gone. What filial piety is there left to speak of? If they continue making a scene, release the dog to bite first, then report to the authorities that they are swallowing our young miss dowry. The gatekeeper received the order and left. Before he even reached the main gate, he heard a commotion outside. Madame Lu's voice was shrill and piercing, audible even from 2 alleys away. These dogs who look down on people. My son is the Marquis. Just wait until he returns. The crowd of onlookers grew larger and larger. When the Lu family had been prestigious, they had often bullied neighbors and locals, earning no goodwill. Now, countless people wanted to watch the spectacle, and some troublemakers began to chime in. The Marquis title has already been stripped. What Marquis are you still talking about? Madame Lu was momentarily choked speechless, her face red as pig liver. Lu Wanyi, however, was a bit quicker, witted than her mother and immediately continued, her tone mournful and pitiful. Dear neighbors, our Lu family was framed by servants. We are truly wronged. Elder brother, I, Lu Yan, am truly still alive in this world. Once he returns, everything will naturally become clear. No matter how much she acted, the people around only treated it as entertainment to watch. Dusk gradually descended, the last rays of red on the horizon swallowed by clouds. A chill swirled through the alley on the wind. Blown by the cold wind, Madame Lu's mind actually cleared a bit, and she began pounding on the door again. Lin Xing lived as a person of our Lu family, and in death will be a ghost of the Lu family. Now we have nowhere to return to and can only seek shelter with our in-laws. The Lin family is as wealthy as a nation. Providing us with a meal and a place to sleep will not cost much. Open the door quickly. We are all family. Do not force us to the end of our rope. I, an old woman, am fine, but there is still an unmarried young lady. Are we to let mother and daughter sleep on the streets? Lu Wanyi also opportunely knelt and took 2 steps forward, kowtowing toward the door, her voice desolate. Sister-in-law, if there is any lingering spirit in the afterlife, please open your heart of mercy. Before the words had fully left her lips, the gate slammed open with a crash. A large wolfhound with glossy fur charged out, growling lowly and baring its white teeth. The crowd of onlookers collectively retreated a large section. Madame Lu and Lu Wanyi were even more terrified, their souls nearly fleeing their bodies. Madame Lu let out a cry and collapsed to the ground. Lu Wanyi hurriedly supported her as they staggered backward, their skirt hems covered in dust. The gatekeeper held the dog and said unhurriedly, "The young miss is gone. There is no longer any talk of filial piety or lack thereof. If you insist on bringing up connections, then the 80 chests of dowry that vanished without a trace in the Lu manor must be properly accounted for. If the old madam continues to linger shamelessly at our door, I will report it to the authorities. At that point, you will not have to worry about wandering the streets. There will naturally be a prison to take you in." The onlookers' gazes all turned toward Madame Lu and Lu Wanyi, Tiske owing debts and refusing to repay yet having the thick skin to cling to others' doors. Truly shameless. Madame Lu's lips trembled several times, but in the end she said nothing. Struggling to her feet, she pulled Lu Wanyi around and left. The gatekeeper slammed the door shut, the large wolfhound wagged its tail and returned. That night, Madame Lu wandered about in a sorry state. After leaving the Lin residence, she went to the Qin family's residence. Previously, she had intended to form a marriage alliance with the Qin family, but had hesitated because she disdained the 5th-rank official position of the Qin patriarch as too low. Now, the Qin family would not even bother to open their door. Mother and daughter could only swallow their humiliation and stay in an inn. Caiyun recounted this to me, her voice full of sarcasm. Having fallen to this point yet still staying in a heavenly grade room at the inn, no wonder their family fortune was squandered. I laughed heartily and leisurely took a sip from the teacup in my hand. In my past life, the Lu family had used a letter of divorce to sweep me out the door, not even allowing me to take a single coin. Now, mother and daughter could still use silver hairpins to pay for their room and stay in a heavenly room at the inn. In the end, it was still too comfortable for them. Thinking back to how in my past life I had poisoned them to a grueling, agonizing death and eradicated their entire bloodline, I felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction in my heart. I endured for a while, grinding my teeth in the middle of the night, taking a step back, and regretting for half a lifetime in frustration. Settling scores on the spot was truly extremely satisfying. I slept at night without a single worry on my mind. My life was meant to be glorious and splendid. Why should I entangle myself with these blood-sucking leeches? I was determined to trample them into the mud early, trample them thoroughly, not giving them even a single chance to cling to me again, so that I could live my happy life in peace and joy. The matters in the capital, I had mostly wrapped up. Madame Lu and Lu Wanyi were barely getting by in the inn, using silver hairpins to pay for lodging and pawning bracelets for food, growing more destitute by the day. I had people monitoring them. According to my memories from my past life, the silver they had would not last them even a month. I did not need to lift a finger. They would squander themselves into poverty. What I needed to worry about was Lu Yan. News from the people I had sent to follow him had arrived. Lu Yan, leading Lu Fang and carrying the last remaining banknotes from the Marquis Manor, planned to travel leisurely through the landscapes of Jiangnan for 3 years. He was completely unaware that the sky in the capital had already fallen. Half a month passed and my body had fully recovered. During this time, Chin Mama had found me the best qi, tonifying and blood, nourishing prescriptions. Every day she used medicinal meals to nourish me. Now my complexion was rosy and healthy, my eyes bright and clear. I could finally go out and make a move. I led my trusted maidservant Cai Yun and 7 or 8 guards with exceptional skills, spurring our horses in pursuit of Lu Yan. When we caught up, Lu Yan and Liu Fang were at the ferry crossing, with a light drizzle falling. They were about to board a boat to Jiangnan. The two of them shared a single oiled paper umbrella, standing shoulder to shoulder beneath a willow tree by the ferry. I did not know what Liu Fang said, but Lu Yan lowered his head to look at her, his face full of smiles. That appearance was truly one of deep affection, enough to make outsiders envious. I sat inside the carriage in the distance, watching quietly for a while before giving the order to disembark. My boat had long been prepared. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary passenger boat. The boat owner was an honest, simple young man with a Jiangnan accent, speaking with an extremely affable smile. When Lu Yan went to ask the price, the boat owner quoted a perfectly fair price and even enthusiastically helped them carry their luggage. Lu Yan and Liu Fang happily boarded the boat, even asking the boat owner for a pot of tea. They sat chatting and laughing while waiting for departure. The boat slowly left the dock, the scenery on the shore gradually receding. Lu Yan stood at the bow, hands clasped behind his back, gazing at the ink-green mountains on both sides. The river breeze brushed his face and he felt utterly at ease. Lu Fang leaned beside him, softly reciting some poem, something like the misty rain descending on Yangzhou. I was on another boat, following silently from a distance. After the boat had traveled for more than half a day, rocking along the embankment, Lu Yan and Liu Fang had already fallen unconscious. The knockout drug had been placed in the tea. The boatman was my guard, Lin Sheng. Even this boat had been purchased by me the day before just for today. Lin Sheng waved his oar toward us, and my boat quickly approached. Cai Yun stepped forward and pried open Lu Yan's mouth. I took out the bowl of self-terminating medicine I had prepared and cooled in advance, pouring it bit by bit into his mouth, and considerately gave him another pot of tea to rinse with. Both of them had been thoroughly searched. Banknotes and loose silver were all taken by me. Once I finished, the guards quickly carried the two into the small hold below deck, bound their hands and feet, and stuffed cloth into their mouths to prevent any noise if they woke midway. Satisfied, I returned to my own boat. As for Lin Sheng, he turned the boat toward the open sea, heading south day and night without pause, rowing deep into the ocean. In the deep sea I had long prepared a deserted island. Since Lu Yan no longer cared about his marquis status, and insisted on so-called true love, then let true love stay with him, on that isolated island overseas as a pair of wild mandarin ducks, free and unrestrained. Without banknotes, without servants, without the glory and wealth of the Marquis Manor, and no need to worry about heirs as a burden. Just the two of them, quiet and peaceful on that island, with no one to disturb them for eternity. Meanwhile I would remain in the capital, grandly opening a glorious and splendid life of my own. Although the Lin family had amassed great wealth through commerce, scholars, farmers, artisans, and merchants, merchants still ranked last. My parents, despite being great tycoons in Shuzhong, still found it hard to avoid being schemed against by a fallen Marquis Manor. I wanted to change the status quo and make the Lin family imperial merchants. Imperial merchants in previous dynasties had been granted the position of Minister of the Imperial Stud, rank 2, for helping the court gather military provisions, but now the world was at peace with no wars. To seek an official path, one had to find another way. Since my time in Shuzhong, I had advised my father to sponsor impoverished but talented students. This spring, among the students sponsored by the Lin family, 3 entered officialdom. The most outstanding was Wenjung, who passed as second in the palace examination. In the palace exam, he was personally praised by His Majesty for his seasoned writing and was deemed worthy of important use. He was now appointed as records administrator under the Jingzhao Yin, specifically managing the construction of the capital. Wenjung was a grateful person. After the golden list was announced, he sent word that as long as there was a request, he would never refuse. In my past life, it was also thanks to his protection that I only suffered minor injuries from those 2 canings. Otherwise, I could not have escaped the cold pool. Now, in my heart, I was planning to have him help me with something. The court wanted to open trade with the western regions and planned to expand the eastern market. The current eastern market was in the southeast of the capital, and its area was no longer sufficient. The diplomatic quarters of the Court of State Ceremonial was in the north, where envoys from various countries resided, making travel inconvenient. If expansion was needed, the most suitable location happened to be the area where the Marquis Manor was located, connected to the Sifangguan on the outside, bordering the old eastern market to the east, connected to the official road to the north, and close to the transport dock to the south. It was a naturally perfect position. I had flipped through the capital's map no less than 100 times. I could recite every alley and street by heart. Besides the Marquis Manor, most of that area consisted of old residential houses with not too many households. Although buying it would cost a lot, my financial resources could still support it. I secretly had 7 or 8 brokers negotiate, with prices fluctuating high and low, so no one would realize it was the same person behind the purchases. Once the outer area was connected into one piece, I began moving on the inner part. After 5 months, I finally purchased all 72 residential houses, bringing along a stack of land deeds and a newly drawn plan for the expanded eastern market. Dressed in men's attire, I went to the house in the capital that I had prepared for Wenjung. The moment Wenjung saw the drawing, his eyes lit up. Although he was second in the palace examination, his qualifications were still shallow, and he had no significant political achievements yet. This plan to expand the eastern market was like sending charcoal in snowy weather for him. The Lin family was willing to donate free of charge 36 plots of land in our name, along with all the residential land we had purchased, to the court for expanding the eastern market, asking only one thing in return, that the Lord help arrange matters. Wenzheng clasped his hands. "Young miss, you are my benefactor. There is no need to call me Lord, just call me Wenzheng. If there is anything, feel free to speak." He pondered for a moment. "Please grant your father an official position." Wenzheng was silent for a while, then raised his head to look at me. "Based on this drawing and the land deeds, according to custom, it is indeed possible to seek an official position. I just do not know what rank the young miss desires." I smiled. "Lord Wen, what rank do you think this piece of land from my Lin family is worth?" Wenzheng did not answer immediately. He lowered his head and carefully examined the drawing once more. The map was drawn extremely meticulously. Where to build shops, where to erect warehouses, where to open roads, where to arrange foreign merchants' quarters. Everything was clearly annotated. Even drainage and fire prevention alleys had been considered. This was absolutely not something that could be drawn in a day or two, let alone by an outsider. Wenzheng looked at me deeply, carefully put away the map, and stood up. "Young miss, rest assured, this official will do his utmost." After he left, Caiyun leaned close and whispered, "Young miss, can Lord Wen really do it? He is only a 6th rank official. He himself cannot do it, but he knows who can." I raised my teacup and blew gently. The Jingzhao Yin needs achievements. The Ministry of Works needs merit. The Ministry of Revenue needs to save the treasury. The Lin family is gifting a piece of land and a complete plan for free. All 3 yamen benefit. Who can stop this? Caiyun nodded, half understanding. My parents had entered the capital, living this life again. Seeing my parents for the first time, the emotions surging in my heart were almost overwhelming. In my past life, I had hidden in the western regions, thousands of li away from my parents, leaving them to worry about me even at the age when they should have been enjoying their later years. It was truly unfilial. In this life, I was determined to fulfill my father's long-cherished wish and make the Lin family stand tall and proud in the capital. 3 months later, the imperial edict arrived. My father, who had dominated the business world for half his life, still trembled as he knelt to receive the edict. In one step, he became the Minister of State Ceremonial, managing the reception of envoys from all directions, a High Minister of rank 2 at court. My mother was also granted a rank 2 patent of nobility. The expansion of the Eastern Market went smoother than anyone imagined. The court did not take the Lin family's land for nothing. The edict clearly stated that after the Eastern Market was expanded, the entire Western Street would be given to the Lin family to plan and manage themselves. Taxes would be halved for 5 years, more practical than any other reward. That piece of land, after demolishing old houses and building the new market, once it became prosperous, the rent from the shops alone would be a deal that turned 1 into 10,000. 2 years later, on the day the expanded Eastern Market was completed, 10,000 people poured into the streets of the capital. The main road of the new Eastern Market was wide enough for 6 carriages to travel side by side. The road was paved with newly quarried green stone, with neat and orderly drainages on both sides. Though called a market, it was more like a small city, with ward walls on all 4 sides and watchtowers at the 4 corners. Each side, east, west, south, and north, had 1 gate. Bells rang in the morning, drums at night. Strict regulations, yet lively all the same. Stepping into the Western Merchant District felt like entering another world. The calls of merchants from the western regions, the music of kucha musicians, the shouts of vendors from Khotan selling pastries, the gongs and drums from the opera alley, all blended together like a thick bubbling soup, steam rising in waves. Merchants from various countries, camel caravans from the western regions, monks from Tianzhu, wealthy merchants from the Arab lands, along with officials, commoners, small traders, and artisans of the capital, rubbed shoulders in the crowd. It was truly a scene of peace and prosperity. In the spice shop of the Persian merchants, saffron, pepper, cardamom, and cloves were piled high. The jewelry shop of the Arab merchants was filled with things the capital had never seen before: emeralds, moonstones, lapis lazuli, and even a kind of marquise Suisse pearl that changed color with the light. The shop was packed 3 layers deep inside and out. It was hard for water to get through. From the grape wine tavern of the Kucha people, there was an entire wall inlaid with large ceramic jars brought from the western regions. The mouths of the jars were covered with cloth, and according to the tubes, the liquid flowed out, red as fine wine. Beside them, several Kucha women with high buns played the curved pipa, producing melodious and graceful tunes. Make way, the camel caravan is coming," someone shouted, and the crowd automatically parted. A team of camels slowly approached, followed by several ox carts loaded with rolled carpets and felts. Suddenly, from afar came the sound of gongs and drums. The opera alley had begun its performance. Someone else shouted, and a large crowd surged southward. After the old Marquis Manor was leveled, I had built a large theater here. On all 4 sides were wooden viewing stands, with a large stage in the middle. Tall flagpoles were planted around, hung with colorful banners. On the stage, wrestlers were performing, 2 strong men bare-chested, wearing only loincloths, grappling back and forth with thunderous impacts. Beside it was an open space where people formed a circle. In the middle, a storyteller was recounting the 3 kingdoms, striking his wake-up block while narrating Zhao Zilong charging in and out of the battlefield 7 times. Saliva flew as his voice rang out powerfully. Even the vendor selling candied hawthorns nearby listened so intently he forgot to make sales. Further ahead was the acrobatic stage. A youth of about 14 or 15 had a bamboo pole in his mouth, balancing a porcelain bowl on top, while spinning 3 plates with his hands and riding a unicycle around the stage, dazzling the onlookers. North against the wall was a row of small tents where Western regions performers had set up to demonstrate illusions. A tall, thin Persian man spread a black cloth on the ground, muttering incantations, then suddenly jerked it up. There was actually a coiled snake on the ground. The onlookers cried out in fear but could not help crowding closer. There were also performers from Fulin who could conjure fire from thin air. Rubbing his hands together, blue flames leapt from his fingertips, flickering eerily in the shadows. Then he stuffed them into his mouth and swallowed, only to spit them out from his ears. I watched until I was entranced and delighted. In my heart, I secretly calculated that this alone was not enough. I needed to find a few more opera troupes, crosstalk, shadow puppetry, marionettes, and more. I would bring them all here. Best to find a few more people to sing small tunes and set up a cool tent nearby selling tea and wine, so one could watch while drinking. That would be true enjoyment. At dusk, I stood at the main gate of the former Marquis Manor, now the entrance to the opera alley. Looking back at the entire Eastern Market Street, the sun was setting, casting golden afterglow over the green stone road, draping the whole street in shimmering gold. As the lanterns lit up, the lamps of the Eastern Market one by one shone brightly, dyeing the street red. The sound of gongs and drums from the distant opera alley grew louder and louder, vaguely like the opening of a grand play. Lu Yan had been traveling toward the capital. The closer he got, the more uneasy he felt. He remembered that the street in front of the Marquis Manor had once been one of the quietest alleys in the capital. Both sides were lined with scholar trees, their canopies covering the entire road in summer. But now this street was 3 times wider, paved with new green stone, with shops lined up one after another on both sides. Every few steps there was a stall selling all kinds of goods. His heart skipped a beat, but he still held on to a sliver of hope. 3 years had passed, the capital had changed greatly, taking a wrong turn was common. Turning a corner, the place that had been the Marquis Manor in his memory finally appeared before his eyes, a vast empty plot. A fluttering banner reading Marquis Manor Opera Alley waved in the wind. Beneath that banner, a strong man in red pants was performing the chest. Stone act. A green stone slab weighing over 100 caddies was placed on his chest. Another strong man swung a large hammer down with a shout. The stone shattered into several pieces and the surrounding crowd erupted in thunderous cheers. Lu Yan's face instantly turned deathly pale. Just then, the acrobat with the pole nearby was changing position. The performer had a 30-foot-long bamboo pole on his head, with a 7 or 8-year-old child standing unsteadily on top, spinning 3 colorful plates in his hands. Make way, the performer shouted twice. Lu Yan still stood there dazed, staring fixedly at the banner, as if his acupoints had been struck. Make way, the performer shouted again, louder this time. Just then, the fire-swallowing performer across the way reached the climax of his performance. A stream of fire shot from his mouth, not upward, but straight across Lian's head. Lu Yan felt a burning sensation on his head, then smelled a familiar burnt odor. On the deserted island, sometimes when he grilled fish, if the fire was too big, the fishtail would burn and give off this exact smell. In an instant, his head and face were covered in soot, black as charcoal. The crowd around first froze for a moment, then burst into loud laughter. He yelped and took 2 steps back, frantically slapping his head to extinguish the smoking hair. The fire-swallowing performer was also startled. Sorry, honored guest, you stood too close. I was performing fire, swallowing, and you stood right in front of me. Isn't that asking to be burned? This is the Yongning Marcus Manor. How dare you act wildly on my territory? Lu Yan's chest heaved violently. The people around crowded over. The Yongning Marcus Manor has no heir. Its title was stripped 3 years ago. Which remote mountain did you crawl out from? You didn't even know this. It was like a thunderclap exploding by his ears. Lu Yan had imagined 10,000 scenes of returning home. He thought that by washing his hands and leaving, someone would naturally clean up everything for him. When he returned from his leisurely travels in the mountains and rivers, he would still be the heir of the Marquis Manor. But now his eyes swept around. Camel caravans of foreign merchants, acrobatic stalls, storytelling stages, opera troupes. Every word stuck in his throat. The Marquis Manor was gone, the title was lost. There was not an inch of land or tile here that belonged to him anymore. The fire-swallowing performer leaned in to look at his head. Honored guest, your hair probably cannot be saved. I still have half a bottle of golden sore medicine prepared for treating burns. Why don't you take it and try? Lu Yan shot him a fierce glare and turned to leave. He walked too fast and tripped over a protruding green stone, staggering 2 steps and nearly falling. The crowd burst into another round of laughter. This person must have something wrong with his head, blind and stupid, beyond saving. Lu Yan shook his head vigorously. He had only been gone 3 years. How could heaven and earth change so quickly? Suspecting he was dreaming, he fiercely pinched himself but did not wake. He slapped himself hard twice more but still did not wake. His home was truly gone. Lu Feng followed behind him, wearing tattered old clothes, her hair dry and yellow, her face cracked from the sea wind. Timidly, she tugged at his sleeve. Where are we going? Lu Yan ignored her and staggered straight toward the Jingzhou Yin Yamen. He was the Yongning Marquis, a descendant of meritorious officials enfeoffed by the previous emperor. As long as he returned, everything could still be turned around. Lu Yan waited outside the yamen for half a day before finally squeezing inside. A runner from the Jingzhou Yin glanced at him, his eyes as if looking at a beggar. The Yongning Marcus Manor had its title stripped 3 years ago. Lu Yan slammed his palm on the table. I am not dead yet. On what grounds was my title stripped? The runner slowly flipped open a file and tossed it in front of him. Lu Yan lowered his head to look, and his vision immediately darkened in waves. Old Marquis Lu Xuan embezzled military provisions in large quantities. His crime was unpardonable. Title stripped, forever barred from official use. The words "forever barred from official use" burned before his eyes, making his head spin. The runner added, "As for your wife, on the wedding day she jumped into the ravine to commit suicide out of love. The manor has no male heir left." The title naturally could not be preserved. Lu Yan opened his mouth, but not a single word came out. He suddenly remembered the night 3 years ago. He had thought that by leaving, he was putting himself in a dead end to find a way to live. Pushing all problems onto Lin Jing, she would naturally clean up the mess. But Lin Jing had actually died too. He had driven himself into a dead end. Coming out of the Jingzhaoyin, Lu Yan felt as if all strength had been drained from his body. He went everywhere asking for his mother's whereabouts. She still had some money, after all. But when he found Madame Lu, the heart that had been hanging in suspense also dropped to the ground with a thud. Madame Lu was living in a dilapidated house in the southern part of the city. Half the wall in the courtyard had collapsed, and the paint on the door was peeling in patches. She was sitting on the doorstep, picking through a pile of wilted vegetables for the parts still edible. Her hair had turned completely white, and her clothes were patched in more than a dozen places. "Mother," Madame Lu raised her head. Her cloudy eyes looked at him for a long time. Suddenly, she let out a shrill cry and rushed forward, hitting and punching him. "You beast! You only care about yourself. You ran away and lost the entire manor, lost the title. You have ruined me." Luan was driven back step by the blows. The guilt in his heart quickly turned to anger. He grabbed his mother's wrist and lowered his voice. "Mother blames me. But back then it was Mother who nodded and let me go. It was Mother who had come up with the idea to let Lin Xing pay the debts and return after they were cleared." Madame Lu was shouted at like this and choked, unable to speak, only crying. Lu Yan grew angrier as he spoke. "Does Mother know how much I suffered outside? On that deserted island for 3 years, eating raw fish and drinking rainwater, nearly starving to death. I finally managed to return with great difficulty. And Mother? Mother has ruined the house to this state and still has the face to blame me." Madame Lu was scolded until her whole body trembled, unable to reply with a single word. Just as they were arguing, Lu Wanyi arrived. She was wearing an old silk dress, half new and half old, with a thick layer of powder on her face, but it could not hide the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, or the haggard look beneath them. Seeing Lu Yan, she first froze, then her expression turned cold. She said icily, "You still know the way back?" Lu Yan was already full of anger. Seeing his sister speak with such sarcasm only fueled the fire. "What kind of attitude is that? I am your elder brother." "Elder brother?" Lu Wanyi's voice immediately rose sharply. "Are you worthy of being called elder brother? You led that vixen and ran away, abandoning the whole family without care, forcing me to become a concubine for someone else. And you still have the face to return? Becoming a concubine was your own choice. I did not force you. There was not even food to eat. If I did not go serve others, was I supposed to starve to death with Mother?" Brother and sister went back and forth, arguing more and more fiercely, until they finally came to blows. Lu Wanyi scratched Lu Yan's face. Lu Yan pushed her back and she fell heavily to the ground, crying heartbreakingly. In the end, the neighbors could not stand it anymore and shouted over the wall, "What are you arguing about? Argue more and we will report it to the authorities." Only then did this noisy scene come to an end. Lu Yan stayed in the southern part of the city. He understood very well that his mother could not be relied upon, and his sister even less so. He had to find a way to survive on his own. He inquired with quite a few old friends, but none of them would lend him even a single coin. They avoided him like the plague. However, they did give him one useful piece of news. Lin Jing's father, Lin Yuanshen, was now Honglu Siqing. The only daughter of the Lin family had died. If he was willing to humble himself and care for Lin's father in his old age, relying on the Lin family's vast fortune and their connections in officialdom, Lu Yan would definitely still have a chance to make a comeback. Full of confidence, Lu Yan used the last bit of silver from Madame Lu to buy a decent set of clothes, tidied himself up, and went to the Lin residence. After the gatekeeper went in to announce him, Lin Yuanshan came out. Lu Yan smiled broadly and stepped forward with clasped hands. "Uncle Lin, your nephew Lu Yan has come especially to pay his respects." Lin Yuanshan looked at him, his expression icy. "You still have the face to come here?" Lu Yan smiled appeasingly. "Uncle Lin, there was some misunderstanding back then." "Misunderstanding?" Lin Yuanshan's voice suddenly rose sharply. "On the wedding night, you led your cousin and faked your death to run away, causing my daughter to jump into the ravine. And you dare say to me that it was a misunderstanding? Uncle Lin, At that time this nephew was also forced by circumstances. Lin Yushan did not give him a chance to finish. He turned and ordered the gatekeeper, "Beat this beast out for me. If he dares come again, directly send him to the authorities and accuse him of plotting for wealth and harming lives." Two servants stepped forward, one on each side, grabbed Lu Yan and threw him out the door. Lu Yan fell flat on his face, his hat lost, his clothes torn, in a miserable state. I was hidden in the carriage behind him, quietly observing from afar, nearly bursting into laughter. Lu Yan left dejectedly. Halfway there, a group of people suddenly poured out from an alley and surrounded him. The leader had a fierce, fleshy face, waving a wooden staff in his hand, and looked at him with narrowed eyes and a smile. "Oh, isn't this Marco Lu? 5 years without seeing you and you have finally returned. Your father owed our Wanhua Lu 13,000 taels back then. With interest, it is 20,000 taels. How do you propose to settle this debt?" Lu Yan's calves began to tremble. That was my father's debt. It has nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with you?" The man slammed his staff on the ground. "Back then you were in the brothels with your father, embracing women on both sides. You did not say that then." Lu Yan tried to run but was immediately grabbed by the collar. "Brothers, Marquis Lu's body is precious. Let us find a place to talk properly." He was dragged straight into the alley. Screams of agony rang out continuously, enough to make one's scalp tingle. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the group finally dispersed. Lu Yan lay in the alley covered in wounds, his face swollen like a pig's head, blood from the corner of his mouth flowing onto the ground. One creditor before leaving did not forget to spit on him. No longer a marquis, and still putting on airs, Lu Yan lay there for a long time before he could catch his breath. He struggled to his feet and limped away. After this great disaster, he began to resent everyone. He hated his lustful father who had ruined everything, hated his useless mother, hated his sister for not being able to marry into a good family, hated Lin Xing for dying too early, hated the creditors for showing no respect. But what he hated most was Lu Fang. If she had not seduced him, why would he have been moved to run away? If it had not been for chasing after her, how could he have fallen to his current state? Lu Yan's temper grew more irritable by the day. He began beating Lu Fang. At first it was only verbal abuse. Later he directly used his hands and feet. Lu Fang was beaten until her body was covered in green and purple bruises. She used her hair to cover the wounds on her face and her sleeves to cover the bruises on her arms. She quietly cooked porridge, washed clothes, and cleaned the house like a wooden puppet. She had thought of running away, but she had nowhere to go. Her natal family had been convicted, and distant relatives refused to take her in. Without Lu Yan, even surviving would be difficult. She could only endure. But how long could she endure? That night, Lu Yan returned drunk. In his drunkenness, he grabbed Lu Fang by the hair, pulled her to the ground, and stomped hard on her waist. "It is all because of you. It is all because of you, this cheap wench, that I am ruined." Lu Fang curled up on the ground, hugging her head and not saying a word. A few days later, while Lu Fang was cooking porridge in the kitchen, she heard Lu Yan and Lu Wanyi talking in the room. One tale. Lu Wanyi's voice was very low. "I have already inquired. Although she was married before, her looks are still there. The brothel over there is willing to pay this price. Ah, this cheap wench has harmed me so badly. Selling her into the brothel is already letting her off easy." The ladle in Lu Fang's hand fell into the pot with a clatter. She stood behind the stove, her whole body trembling, tears silently falling until they dried up. She took out a small paper packet from her bosom. It was rat poison that a peddler had dropped that morning. At the time, she had picked it up as if possessed. It turned out it was for this moment. The peddler had been arranged by me. When the porridge was ready, Lu Fang poured the powder in and stirred it evenly. No trace could be seen. She ladled 3 bowls and brought them to the table. Lu Yan picked up his bowl and took a sip, frowning. "Why is there a slightly bitter taste?" Lu Fang lowered her head. "Perhaps I added too much salt." Lu Yan said nothing more and drank the bowl of porridge in a few gulps. Lu Fang picked up her own bowl, looked at the murky porridge inside, and tilted her head back to drink it all in one go. "In the previous life, I had personally poisoned them. In this life, after going around in circles, they still ended up feeding the poison to themselves with their own hands. Some people were born as strangling vines." 3 days after Lu Yan died, I restored my identity and returned home. To the outside world, my explanation was that after jumping into the ravine, I lost my memory and was rescued and cared for by a nun in a nunnery. The nun was advanced in age. I served in the nunnery for 3 years. Only after the nun passed away did I come down the mountain. I was recognized and returned home. Whether outsiders doubted it or not, I no longer cared. The Lin family was now like the midday sun. Countless people were willing to flatter me. Half a month after returning home, Madame Lu stood outside the residence and cursed loudly. Lin Xing, you poisonous woman. You are the one who killed my son. If you had not run away, how could the manor have fallen to ruin? My father was about to go out and deal with her when I stopped him. I had avoided the Luthu family for 3 years. It was time to end everything. I had a grand tutor chair placed outside the door and leisurely debated with Madame Lu. Madame Lu, your words are incorrect. Your son led his cousin and faked his death to run away on the wedding night. As for me, I jumped into the ravine because I wanted to commit suicide out of love. If he had not run, why would I have stayed in the nunnery for 3 years? The Lu family's title was stripped because of embezzlement and breaking the law. This is clearly written in the files of the Court of Judicial Review. What does it have to do with a widow who had only been in the household for 2 hours? Madame Lu still insisted. My son only jumped into the ravine and lost his memory, which is why he did not return. I laughed. Really? Then what a coincidence. I also jumped into the ravine and lost my memory, which is why I did not return. The feng shui at the bottom of that ravine must not be good. It specifically damages the mind. If the old madam wants to investigate clearly, you can try jumping once yourself. When you return, we can compare statements. Madame Lu's face turned red as pig liver. You are truly unfilial. I withdrew my smile. Old Madam, Volume B, Article 17 of the Great Zhou Laws clearly states that a woman who has lost her husband may return to her natal home on her own. No one may force her to remain chaste. Your son and I never even consummated our marriage. There is no question of filial or unfilial. You schemed against me. In the end, Madame Lu could no longer hold back and shouted hoarsely. I stood up, walked in front of her, bent down, and said in a voice only the two of us could hear, that is right, I did scheme against you. Those 80 chests of dowry were empty from the beginning. I never intended to fill your pit. You only allowed yourselves, as a prestigious noble family, to scheme against a merchant's daughter like me. You do not allow me to protect myself and scheme back against you? Madame Lu's mouth twitched. She could not say a single word. Old Madam, the wheel of fortune turns. I stood up straight and looked down at her. Back then, your Marquis manor was powerful and prestigious. You could bully a merchant's daughter like me at will. Now I am the daughter of a rank 2 official, and you are just a commoner in plain clothes. Do you find the taste of being schemed against by others pleasant? Madame Lu's face instantly turned ashen. Her lips trembled, her throat made a gurgling sound, and she fell backward. By the time she was helped up, her whole body was stiff, her mouth crooked and eyes slanted. She could not even speak. That is a stroke. I had her sent back to the dilapidated house in the southern city. If she died in front of the Lin residence, it would be too unlucky. Life returned to peace. My father was smooth sailing at court, and business in the eastern market continued to grow. Everything at home was wonderful. Sometimes I would think of the western regions from my past life, the road I often traveled to the western regions, the vast desert with solitary smoke over the setting sun, the long river with the setting sun over the plains, the sound of camel bells tinkling in the wind. That was the freest period of my previous life. The court wanted to open a mutual market in Ganzhou, allowing merchants from the central plains to trade with the countries of the western regions. Ganzhou, a strategic point in the Hexi corridor. The newly opened mutual market there contained enormous business opportunities. I bid farewell to my parents, wanting to go there and open a new horizon. The day I left the capital was a beautiful day. High sky, light clouds, cool autumn wind. The carriage slowly drove out of the city gate. I lifted the carriage curtain and looked back at the silhouette of the capital one last time. The city gate grew farther and farther, the city wall smaller and smaller, finally becoming a gray line on the horizon. Cai Yun beside me asked, "Young miss, when will we return from this trip?" I thought for a moment and smiled. "No rush. When we have seen enough of the desert sunset, then we will talk." The convoy traveled westward. After 3 days, they reached a post station. I got off the carriage to change horses, planning to ride for a while to stretch my muscles and bones. Just as I turned to mount the horse, I heard the sound of galloping hooves from behind. A man on a red horse, covered in road dust. It was Wen Zheng. I reined in my horse and watched him gallop up to me, smiling and raising my eyebrows. "Lord Wen, where are you headed?" He steadied himself on the horse's back and opened his mouth, coughing twice. Probably rode too fast and caught a chill from the wind. "Ganzhou," he said. "I have just been appointed as Ganzhou Sima. It happens to be on the same road as you." Ganzhou Sima, a 6th-rank military official, managing military affairs and public security in Ganzhou. I looked at him and suddenly laughed. From records administrator of the Jingzhou Yin to Ganzhou Sima, This counted as being demoted 2 ranks in a row. His ears turned red, but he still maintained a serious and proper expression. The mutual market in Ganzhou is a major matter for the court. It happens that I also want to go to Ganzhou. It happens. I gently urged my horse forward. The sound of hooves was crisp, and the autumn wind brushed past our faces. The camel caravan was about to depart, camel bells ringing in the wind. As for those who had already gone far, they were all stories of the previous chapter. The wind blew, the page turned, and I was about to begin a new story.